Hey guys, I'm back. I didn't go AWOL. I appreciate all the messages checking in to see where I was at. I took a little bit of time off. As all you guys know, the work-life balance is hard sometimes. Being a present boss, giving customers consistent quality while fumbling through and learning how to run a business and still being a good husband and father is really rough sometimes. And sometimes you have to back burner stuff that you really love to do, like this podcast. And with that being said, if you guys caught my quick little intro asking that I want to hear from you guys, I want to clarify something. I've been pretty selective about who I choose to have on here for reasons. I want to have people who are relatable and who have been there and in the trenches. I want to talk to people who have something to teach or something to learn. I started this podcast because I wanted to meet and learn from other people in the industry. I regularly get emails from you guys, and I'm honored that you even care about my opinion. I'm positive there are way more qualified people out there to help me answer these most asked questions. So instead of doing the same format as I always do, I kind of want to table a few questions and have a mini series with short episodes for the next couple months to answer some of those questions that everybody has been asking. So yes, I do want to hear from you guys. I'm going to put a list of questions out on our Instagram page, such as what did you learn the hard way? What was your biggest pain point? What do you wish you knew before you started? And things like that. If you've got answers to some of these questions, I want to hear from you. We can make these short, we can make these 15 minutes, we can make these 30 minutes, we can make these an hour if you want. It's up to you guys and what you feel you can add value to. So, by the time you hear this, I want to have these questions posted. If you want to hop on a call with me, give me an email, kevin@jmwfabrication.com. We'll set up a time and we'll see what we can do. I want to start putting these out as they come. So we're going to get back into things pretty quick. So if you've got something, reach out to me, kevin@jmwfabrication.com. And until next time, get out there, get it done, and get it invoiced. Hey guys, welcome to the Welding Business Owners Podcast, where podcasts are late but our bids are on time. I'm your host, Kevin with JMW Fabrication. Today we've got episode number 1 with Dillon from Yeti Welding. I've been trying to reach out and we've been trying to coordinate for over a year to get this happening, but we finally found some time to sit down and chat. This is a long one. We've got 6 episodes here, but I promise you guys, it is filled with awesome information from a really, really growing fabrication company. Dillon is just a cool guy in general. I hope you guys really enjoyed my talk as much as I did talking with him. If you want to find him, go on over on Instagram, find him at Yeti Welding. And without further ado, here's episode number 1. I think I've followed you on Instagram for a while. This is the first time we're actually catching up and talking. Give me from the beginning. More detail, the better.
Yeah, no, cool. So in high school, I wanted to actually be a cabinet master. I was a big wood guy. I loved working with wood and building cabinets and tables. And so all through high school, I was competing in the Skills USA competitions, going to be a cabinetry master. And I wanted to open up a cabinet shop called Eyeball Cabinetry. So somebody can totally steal this idea because I think it'd be super rad if somebody else did it. But I was going to do a cabinet shop called Eyeball Cabinetry where my tradesmen had nothing except for their eye chronometer. They wouldn't use tape measures or squares. Just everything would just be like eyeballing it to build their everything. And they would be these craftsmen of high level. Well, my junior year in high school, I learned how to weld a little bit more proficiently. And that's kind of what led me into getting into the welding industry. But for a full stop background of me, I grew up in a small town in Utah called Spanish Fork. Small when I grew up, getting bigger now. But I grew up in a small town in Spanish Fork on a farm where we learned how to fix everything and anything because, if you're growing up on a farm and if you've been in agriculture, you don't always have a lot of money to hire things out. And so I learned at a young age, probably around 10 or 11 years old, my dad taught me how to weld. And I started welding on the farm around 10, 11 years old, started doing it more often around 12 to 14, fixing tractors and fences and things. And it just became a normal part of life was welding on the farm when things were broken. I mean, obviously I wasn't doing it on a daily basis or even for money until I was about 16. The neighbors had a tractor that was broken, and I welded it for him. And the guy gave me $100 bill. And I was like, what's this for? And he's like, for fixing my tractor. My grandpa said, you can't take any money from that guy because he helped us out, so you can't do that. And that's where I was like, well, it was only like 10 minutes of welding. And that's where the light bulb flickered on that welding makes money. And so I knew how to weld from a young age. But again, the cabinets were my go-to. I wanted to do wood. But my best friend who grew up on the farm with me, his name is Mitchell. He owns a company called Allen's Welding Industrial, really successful outfit. Him and I started welding on the pipeline together in high school. He got a project on a pipeline. He was a year older than me, and he went off on the pipe. And in high school, I was like, he's going to be a welder. I'm going to be cabinet guy. When he came back off his first project, he showed me the money. And I was like, I can do that. So I left the cabinets behind and I followed Mitchell to the pipeline. And he and I traveled the states on and off for a couple of years with an outfit here in Utah that specializes in welding large diameter water lines. And they gave us a shot at a young age welding on large diameter water lines. They believed in us. The guy who hired me, his nickname is Chop. Chop, when I walked in, I'm a slender built guy. When I walked in the office, he said, can you even pick up a wire feeder? And I said, what's a wire feeder? Because again, I'm coming from the farm where all we had was just 60-10 in a welding hood that I couldn't see out of. I said, what's a wire feeder? And he started laughing, rolling in his chair. And he said, if you can pick up a wire feeder and pass a welding test, I'm going to send you out. And that's exactly what I did. I took a welding test right then and there. I didn't even know, honestly, truthfully, I did not know how to weld dual shield. And he just had me do a 3G and a 4G, and I passed it. We did an x-ray on it. And next thing I knew, a week later, I was on my way to Texas to go weld on large diameter water line with my best friend at 18 years old. So we traveled the states together with that company, and I really appreciate what they did for me, teaching me how to work hard, how to be accountable for myself, because literally they weren't watching us. They just put us in a truck and we took off. And that's really what sparked my career in the welding industry, and worked for them for a while on and off. And then I started school. I went to college to do whatever. I had no idea what I was going to go into, but I inevitably met my wife in college and I needed to make more money. So I started to weld at some local fab shops and stopped traveling, learned the fab shop game and the kind of the money that was there and in and around the welding world. Once my wife and I got married, we got pregnant, and I realized I needed more money. And I just started doing side hustle projects for myself. And it was like that split time where I was putting 40 hours in for the man working at local fab shops, 40 hours for myself, and no time for my wife. And she said, you should choose one or the other. And I decided to do that. And I went off on my own when I was, inevitably when it was split, and it was 50 hours for the man and 40 for myself, or 50 for myself and 40 for him. So in 2015, I started up Dillon's welding service. I started with a 2-wheel drive Ford Ranger and a 225 Lincoln Ranger, and I put it in the back of the truck and I hit some job sites. That's kind of where I started. I went around, wasn't a businessman. I don't think I'm a very good businessman right now, but went around to job trailers, knocking on the doors of job trailers, my 2-wheel drive Ford Ranger and my welder in the back. And I'd knock on the door and get a superintendent, tell him I was a welder, and they'd be like, that's cool. And I'd be like, can I do any welding? Not knowing construction very well, I knew I didn't know I was too late in the game. If there's a job trailer in a construction site, you're too late in the game. So I got laughed at quite a bit, and especially when the superintendents would look out the door and they'd see just this little tiny ass truck. And openly, I didn't even have a grinder in the truck. It was just a welder and some lead and some dirty rock. And I started that way. I got laughed at quite a bit. I ended up making my way back into the agricultural welding industry because I knew I could make it there because that's where my grassroots stemmed from. And started welding there. And then more and more I learned about how to grow and do things. And I started reading more books and educating myself and surrounding myself with business people. Because my dad told me, he said, hey, you can't call it Dillon's Welding forever. And I said, why not? He's like, what happens when you get old and you need to sell Dillon's Welding? And I'm like, that's a genius idea. And he gave me a book called The E-Myth, and I read The E-Myth, and it kind of changed the trajectory of Yeti Welding.
Yeah. Michael Gerber, yeah.
I rebranded a couple of times from Dillon's Welding to Hell's Fabrication to Fab One to Arc One to where we are now at Yeti Welding, right? And that's kind of where I started. And then when I was starting and reading those books, it kind of just helped me focus on, like, if you're going to do this, you can either be a single hand rig welder or have 5 or less employees and be involved in the business. Or if you're going to go this direction, you need to have this many, and kind of grew from there. And you know how it goes, Kevin. When you're in the ebbs and flows of business, at the beginning, you have no idea where you're going. All you want to do is make money, do projects, and make stuff happen. And that's kind of where I found myself. And by 2016, I was pretty well established with a couple of employees, and we were rocking and rolling. That's where I found myself into the welding industry. And here I am now, a decade later-ish of my own thing.
Tell me what your growth was like. I feel like we're on like the same growth path. I know what my growth was like, and it still is tough with the growth of hiring guys and trying to keep them happy and be a good boss and be a good leader and manager and still make money and still keep everybody happy. So like, tell me what your journey from, 2016, just you're working for some guys, to like where you are now. Like how many guys do you have?
A total of 16, but 3 of them are part-time. So I still consider them part of my team. So as W-2 payroll employees is 16.
Sure.
And then I also include in part of my team my bookkeepers who are independent, and I hire them out. So I count them. I count my CPA as part of my team, and I count some of the media consultants that I hire out, and as well as, of course, Chad Warren, attorneys at law. My attorney, Chad, you're a part of this. So there's 16, I should say 16 plus.
Yeah.
But in-house, there's 16 of us on a daily basis coming in and out of the office and the shop working, which I don't know how it happened that way, Kevin. Again, the growth went from 1 to 16. I write a fat stack of checks every 2 weeks, and every time I'm stamping those checks and I'm looking at them, I consider, how did this happen? What happened? But I think I just started with every mentality of every welder. I think welders particularly as tradesmen, and tradesmen in general, I shouldn't say just welders particularly, but we all have the ability to create something from nothing to whatever we're building. And as builders, we think, oh, I can do this myself. I don't need the boss. I'll go off and do my own thing. And we often do that because we can build. And that's what stemmed it, is because I could build, I could grow. That's what I thought. And, I got in and started doing projects, and then I learned how to sell a little bit more. And I think when I became from like a welder to a salesman, you meet with clients, you help them try to design stuff when it's just you and maybe one other person. And we'll use a handrail example. That's a really good one for a lot of startup welders. You go and meet with the client, you show them a design, what you think you can do, show them pictures on Pinterest. So then you're wearing a couple more hats. And then I think I became really good at selling at a really young age. And as I continued to sell for myself, I realized that the workload was way too high. And bringing on one guy to help me out was good. And then 2 guys, and it kind of just escalated. But there became a cap and a point to cash flow purposes where I was selling more jobs and hiring more people, but the cash flow was stemming. And, I really have great appreciation for those mentors that have come across through my life and my transitioning periods in business, who helped me understand, hey, don't just say yes to everything and weld everything. Say no sometimes and actually maybe ask for a little bit more money. And that's really what helped me kind of start to grow a little bit more, to be able to ask for more employees and things like that, because I was not just me doing it. I was having to pay for families. And so I started to learn that kind of stuff in 2017 to 18 when I really started ramping up with a lot more guys. We did a particular project here in Springville where we built a building out of shipping containers. And it wasn't our design, and we didn't come up with the idea. But the individual who ended up hiring us to do the project, I learned a lot from him because I got to spend a lot of time with him from day to day because it was him and his vision. He wanted the building to look like this. He wanted this building to look like containers, but not built out of containers. And so I got to spend a lot of time with Rick. His name was Rick. And Rick is a very well-known individual around here. And he really influenced a lot of the stuff that I made about business decisions in 2018. And he would make, verbal mentions of a lot of different things. And I took a lot of understanding from him, how he grew his business to my own. Mainly just understanding numbers from a standing point and getting actual data to grow my business versus saying, I just have these 10 jobs. I just need 5 welders, or I need this many guys to do that. So I feel like the mentors in my life helped me grow my business to where I'm at, but kind of looking at going from the farm welding to multiple welders working for me. 16 welders kind of gives me anxiety sometimes.
When you say it out loud, you're like, ugh.
No, I've accepted the fact that this is where I rule is here in my chair, and I can do a lot from my chair, but my employees are really 100% what is the success of Yeti Welding at this point.
Yeah. You mentioned that mentor guy that you worked with on that container project. What were some of the things that were really impactful for you and your business that you learned from him?
So to preface you, this was 2018 to 2019, almost to 20. It almost took us like 11 or 12 months and then some on and off. But that was in the early stages where I had one truck, we had one trailer, there was 5 of us. The truck only held 2 of us. So, at times we were sitting 4 of us crammed in the single cab of a truck, and then they were driving their car behind us. And so you have these things in your life where you want, especially as a business owner, you want all this stuff. You want. I want to have the new truck. I want to have the new bigger building. You want to have this stuff. That's where I found myself. And one of the optimal things that I learned from Rick was he had this badass truck, man. And he let us use his truck to haul some of the containers around the project. And I told myself in 2018 that I wanted one of those. And so I just poked at this mentor and I said, hey, will you sell me your truck? And he just rolled it off off of his shoulder. And again, this is a very, very successful individual. And he rolled it off his shoulder and he's like, why would you want to buy my truck? And I was like, because it's badass. And he's like, I know where they sell them. 2 blocks down the road, there's a Chevy dealer. Just go buy one. And I was like, my mind was blown because it was so easy for him. But for me, I had idolized his truck as like the thing that I wanted as a business owner. I wanted a new truck. And it wasn't just a new truck on the lot. I wanted this truck. But when I asked him, I said, I want to buy your truck. And I continued to ask him about the truck, for a couple more days. But every time it was the same answer that seemed so simple to him to say, I know where they sell them. Just go buy one. But for me, I was growing business. I didn't have any money. I didn't quite have my numbers right, whether I was billing. So I could never afford the truck. But he just made it seem so easy. And I thought, you know what if I just had that mentality? What if I just said, instead of just working my ass off so hard, I just thought like, I can just go buy the truck. What if I could break that thought barrier and make it seem like, instead of what I want the truck, what do I have to do to get the truck? So from that time on, when I talked to Rick, I just would wake up every day and I'd say, I'm going to buy myself a Denali Duramax this year, a Denali Duramax. So when we were doing some hard stuff, I just said, we're going to buy a Denali. And the time came where it was time for me to buy a truck because I had enough money. And I know it's super arrogant, but I didn't even drive the truck because I'd already driven his a bunch of times. I went to the lot. I found my white truck that I wanted. I walked in and gave him the 10 grand cash for it for the deposit. And then I went and got the money from the bank, the rest of the money from the bank, went back and got in my truck. But it was that moment of when you see something that you want, you just need to think it's actually not that hard. And that's the base, one of those bases that I learned from Rick is it's actually not that hard. Stop making it so complicated and just figure it out and get that thing. You know, I had made it so complicated in the effect that I was like, I have to have his truck. And he was like, no, I know where they sell them. You can just go get them there. But it was easy for him to think about that. And so when I tried to start changing that about my mentality, it made things a lot easier for me. So that was one of the big things that I learned from Rick was stop making things so overcomplicated. They're easy. You'll just figure them out along the way.
Yeah. It's funny because like once you adopt that mentality, I feel like you can do anything. And, you know, I talk with my wife a lot about what's next after JMW, because there's going to be a point where I'm going to be the bottleneck here. I'm always going to be involved. But if you want to go do something else, I feel like guys who just know how to go out and figure it out can be successful at anything that they do, as long as you have the mentality of, I'm just going to figure it out. And you have the right processes in place to do your whatever it is. If it's your craft, if it's sales, and you have the ability to deliver on it and still have good customer service and quality in there, you can do anything you want.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. I agree with you. You can do a lot of stuff, but it definitely takes the right mindset. But just remember that it's not impossible to get into that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's really cliche to say, but if you find somebody that's living the life that you want to live, talk to them and ask them about it and see how their mentality is on it, you know,
Yep.
Or how did they get their mentality for it? Just like Rick, he had the truck. How did I get that mentality? I asked him about it, and you can go forward. Just like you've mentioned, if you find somebody who is selling and doing those things, just ask them about it and just mimic what they're doing. If you don't know what to do, if you know what to do, do what you know you're not doing, but you know what to do.
So what do you think was one of the biggest breakthroughs in your business when you first started out, to the point where you're like, yeah, I think this is sustainable. Not that any of us have ever like been to the arrival point of making it, but what was like an aha moment when you first started out and you're like, wow, this is actually going to work?
I think a good aha moment, like, wow, this is actually going to work, is when I cashed one of the big checks, right? At the time, it wasn't, I mean, now it's not a big check for me, but there was a time where one of those big checks was $10,000 for me that I got. I did a project, and it was a labor-only project, and I had, charged a fair rate, but it was me plus two individuals compounding our time, but it was only a 3 or 4 day project, but with 3 or 4 of me charging a fair labor's welder's rate, and I'll just use a fictional number because I don't remember exactly what I was billing at the time, but like right now we charge $130 an hour. So to me, it didn't seem like a $10,000 job, but that's what it ended up being because of the billable hours. And when I held that check in my hand after 2 or 3 days and the client had just cut it really quick, and it was $10,000, that was a big check for me. I was like, this is sustainable. All I have to do is do this again and again and again and again. Because working for somebody else in 2015, I was in a fab shop at $13, $14 an hour, and my wife was pregnant, and I asked him if I, could have a little bit more money, and he told me that being the saw boy, I capped out at about where I was at. So, that $10,000 reflected on that pay period was significantly a jump, getting a $900 for 2-week paycheck versus $10,000 for 3 days worth of work. Mind you, I did compound my own time with other individuals helping me weld it. But that was probably that aha moment where I was like, wow, I could do this again and again, And the client booked it again. We were working at a recycling yard. Now I remember exactly what the job was. We were working at a recycling yard, and we were doing hard facing on their trash compactor, the compactor that compacts their aluminum bales. We were hard facing, and they just hired us to just hard face. We just hard faced the whole time. But they scheduled us again, and I think that that's probably why the story sparked me, is because they scheduled us again, and that $10,000, and I was like, wait, we're coming back in a month to do the same thing for $10,000 more dollars? And I was like, bing. And that was like, okay, we can do this again. And for a lot of the times, Kevin, I had this motto: if it went round and round, up and down with metal, I wanted to be a part of it. Because things that go round and round, up and down with metal usually wear out, and you need to build them back up, fix them, and replace them. And so there would be this continual thing, And so we were doing a lot of preventative maintenance and repair work at the time, trying to kind of grab all the equipment game and the equipment world in our area. Anything that goes up and down, round and round, that was getting worn out.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I remember my first aha moment of like a big check. It was for, I don't even remember what the job was, but it's for a customer that we actually still do. And I remember it coming in, and it was like $13,000. And I was like, and it was just me at the time. I want to say maybe it was like overhang for a school or walkway or something like that. And it came in, and I was like, wow, $13,000. I'm like, wait a minute, my bills are paid and the material's paid for. I'm okay. And then I got this check on top of it. Like, oh, okay, this will actually work,
Sometimes the money is the aha moment, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's for a lot of businesses that start, that money is that aha moment in the beginning. It's trying to figure out how to continue to make that money go continually without you.
So what do you think has been the hardest thing for you to learn in business?
To let other people do the thing that I know I'm good at, but I don't have time for. So, and I think that goes with every tradesman, right? Like, I feel, and every welder should feel this, because this is the way that welders are. When a welder hits a job site and their boots hit the ground, instantly they're just talking shit, and you're a welder, right? My beads are better than yours. That's just welder's mentality. You get burned all the time. You just have to have a certain mentality. And so, I feel like I'm a good welder. I can weld with the best of them. I keep and maintain my certs up, even though I don't do a lot of welding. But one of the hardest things that I've learned, to answer your question, is to let other people do the job that I'm good at, that I don't have time to do. I'm good at building handrail. You can give me a basic print or a basic slope of the stairs and just give me toe to toe and the angle, and I don't need to have it drawn out on the CAD program or whatever. I could just go to the saw and start cutting stuff up out of my own brain, because I just know how it's going to work. Really good at that. Do I have the time to do it all the time? No. And that, for me as a business owner, was really hard for me to learn, because I'd see somebody else doing the job that I'm really good at, and I'm like, I could just do it for you faster. And then I'd do that, but then things were lacking behind on the back end of stuff. And so I became my own bottleneck. And I think that's, where you said, at what point do you become the bottleneck? And at like 8 employees, I became the bottleneck, because they couldn't, there was more employees waiting on me. But trying to let others do the thing that I'm good at, that I don't have the time to do, is probably one of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn. But I think is one of the most important lessons, as any business owner should know, is still letting others do the thing that you're good at, but you don't have the time to do.
I have made that mistake, like, in a big way, twice. And the third time I got it. So a little bit of a backstory. The max people that I, Kevin Johnson, can manage is 6. That's where the wheels come off. And I've done that twice because we grew, everything was going good. I don't know where my numbers are at. I don't know if we're making money. All I know is I'm working 70, 80 hours a week. I got a bunch of guys who are putting in 50, 60 hours, and we're pumping stuff out the door. But morale goes down. People get complacent. They're not as good. I'm rushing in to fix things. And we just didn't have the systems in place to grow past 6 people. So we did that once. Some of those guys were subs, so, leaned off of them. Some of the other people who were full-time people on our team just didn't work out with them, shrank back down, did it again, built it back up, was going good. The wheels fell off again. And you almost shrink back. It's almost like licking your wounds. You're like, all right, this isn't working. I'm stressed out. I'm ready to just go home and quit half the time. And it's just not sustainable. So you shrink back again. And the third time that we did this, shrank back, and I'm like, there's got to be something different. We have to do this a different way. So we started building up slowly, making sure we have the right people on board, making sure we're implementing processes, making sure that I am not the easy button for everybody, that everybody can't come to me. My foreman, Dillon, when we hired him is when it all, that was the change that we needed for me to be able to go ask Dillon, go ask Dillon, go ask Dillon. He's got the authority to make all the decisions in the shop. He still comes to me. He's like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to put this? I don't know. It's your shop, dude. You put it where you want it. You know what I mean? So have you had any growing pains with your growth like that?
Oh, for sure. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I had the exact same thing. I think my number was probably right around the same as you, around 6 individuals that just crumble and fall, right? Mm-hmm. I had this weird quirk where I've always wanted to show things on social media. And I think it stems from the very beginning of my days when I knocked on those job trailers with the 2-wheel drive Ford Ranger, and I'm driving away because I was laughed at because, one, I look young. I don't look like I'm 31 years old. And especially when you meet me in person in 2015, I look like I was 12. So here I am knocking on job trailers. And so I wanted to show them, hey, I've got this experience. Although it's been on the farm, how did I do this? And so that's when I started being loud on social media to show my stuff online because I knew I could get to these guys in the job trailers without them asking about it, right? And so I started showing as much stuff as I could online to ensure my work history to these people who I was trying to court work with. And leading up to that kind of caveat moment and to answer the question, I wanted to have somebody that would capture the moment all of the time. And so I wanted to hire a photographer when we had 5 to 6 individuals, about the time that everything was always crumbling and falling apart because I, like you, was in my capacities, at the max of my capacities, but we were doing cool shit. So I wanted it to be captured. And so I hired Mark to come and capture the moment. He was our videographer and our photographer, our media guy. And Mark, when he started at Yeti Welding, Kevin, didn't know how to weld, show up late pretty much all the time. And Mark knows it. So what's up, Mark? But I didn't care that he was late all the time because he was the media guy. He wasn't welding. He wasn't pushing the ball forward. He was just capturing stuff, taking pictures and videos and putting them online, right? I battled a lot of guys in the shop because they're like, we need to fire him. He's not showing up. He's taking advantage of us. He's always late. And I'm like, well, we don't really need him on time. That was the thing, right? But when I hired the photographer and that media guy, when I hired Mark, you can't capture media, 12 hours of media, 7 days a week when you got welders working on, welder schedules. And when you go from one job to the next, and then you're like, wait, you guys work 7 12s and I'm supposed to film everything? Yep. Yeah, he just didn't. He just had too much to capture. So Mark ended up starting to have a lot of impact in our specific business, where the light bulb flickered on for me because Mark was on the computer while I was still welding and working with the guys. But mind you, Kevin, Mark couldn't weld, didn't really know a lot about fabrication, didn't know a lot about the work, but he could run a computer really damn good. So he started helping manage a lot of the office infrastructure just by default, by uploading photos and things. And that's where a light bulb flickered on in my brain, because he was able to handle just simply answering emails for people. And as he was answering emails and things, it was giving me compounded time. And that's when I understood, like, if I needed to grow above 6 individuals, I needed to have somebody in the office that was going to help me actually do the things to make decisions so that I could interject myself in the shop. In my office, there's actually 4 of us in the office up against the, let's say the ones that are actually working full time up against the 10. So we're almost outweighed 50% in the office versus the shop infrastructure side. McKay in the office, he's our team lead. So he's in the office and he's hearing what's happening as we're bidding projects and making things happen, but he's mainly outside. But he's still in the office to relay what's actually happening from computer to out there. So for me, having more of the game to be won in the office when it came to fabrication and projects allowed me to make that jump from 6 plus.
Well, that's it for this episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Check back next week for episode number 2 with Dillon from Yeti Welding. If you want to find him on Instagram, he's over at Yeti Welding. We're at Welding Business Owners Podcast. You can find me at JMW Fabrication. And until next time, get out there, get it done, and get it invoiced.